B'ezrat Hashem, today I would like to share with you a few extremely important lessons that I think each and every single one of us can take out of this Chag of Chanukah. Now, these lessons aren't only applicable to the days of Chanukah, or even the month of Kislev, or even the year 2020. These lessons are applicable to one's everyday life forever and ever. So let's get started. So just to introduce, as you all know, in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, when the Greeks ruled, the Greeks decreed the most terrible and harsh decrees upon the Jews. The three main decrees that they decreed were that the Jews can no longer keep Shabbos, that the Jews can no longer circumcise their male children, and the third decree was that the Beis Din can no longer sanctify the months. After doing so, they entered the Beis Hamikdash, the Heichal, and defiled it in the most terrible manner possible, until Hashem had great mercy on the Jews and gave strength to the Chashmonaim to beat the Greeks in battle, and this happened on the 25th day of Kislev, and that is why we celebrate Chanukah. However, there are two extremely fundamental questions that I think every single person has to ask. The first question is that we know that the Greeks were the strongest, greatest, and largest army in the world. They had already conquered most of the world. If so, why did they not just walk through Yerushalayim, conquer it and finished? What took so long for them to conquer Yerushalayim? The second question I think each person needs to ask is, why were the Greeks interested in Yerushalayim? They had conquered most of the world. Most of the empires were already theirs. If so, why were they even interested in the small city of Yerushalayim? Why did they not occupy their soldiers with more important tasks? I think the answer is very fundamental, but very simple. The answer is that the battle here that the Greeks were fighting against the Jews was not the classic battle. They did not want to kill the body of the Jews. Rather, they wanted to kill the soul of every Jew. They wanted to kill the neshama of every Jew. And this is not like the Battle of Purim, where in the Battle of Purim, all they wanted to do, Haman wanted to kill the body of all the Jews. Here, the Greeks, they want to kill the soul of every Jew. The way what they thought was the best thing to do was the best. They actually thought that this was the best for the Jews, that the Jews follow their way of thinking in politics, their way of thinking in science, and their way of thinking in sport. They thought that they have the ultimate outlook of life, and the Jews must follow it. And already most of the world had fell for their way of life, and therefore they felt as only right that the Jews also do. And this was the war here. The war was to get the Jews to follow them. And that is the reason that they did not conquer Yerushalayim immediately, because they weren't interested in conquering Yerushalayim. They wanted to conquer the neshama of each person. They weren't interested in conquering the city or even taking the people as captives. All they wanted was for the Jews to follow their way of lives. And it's also brought down that they actually used to make parties. They used to make these massive parties for the Jews to come dance at, and everything, all the Olam Hazeh, everything was there just to get the Jews to follow their way of life. Also, they even made Jews Kohanim Gedolim. They even made some of the Yidden judges just to follow their way of life. So we see this battle was not a battle against the bodies of the Jews. They did not want to kill the Jews. Rather, they wanted to kill the soul of the Jews. I'm sure many of you are wondering to yourselves, if so, if this was a battle against the soul of the Jews, surely the Greeks should have enforced that the Jews can no longer do any mitzvahs. Why on earth did the Greeks only enforce these three mitzvahs? Shabbos, Milah, and Kiddush HaChodesh. So I would like to answer that the Greeks felt that these three mitzvahs are extremely fundamental in Yiddishkeit. They felt that, number one, Shabbos. Shabbos shows that Yesh Me'ayin, that Hashem created the world from nothing and on the seventh day he rested. Also, if Hashem can create the world from nothing, Hashem can take the world and make it into nothing. And this was against Greek belief, since the Greeks believed that they are in control of the world and they decide what happens, and there's no one else that controls the world. The second decree we said was Milah. Now, the reason the Greeks felt that this was extremely fundamental in Yiddishkeit is because Milah shows that the physical and spiritual world come together and are controlled by one God. The Greeks held that it was controlled by two separate powers, and therefore this they felt was extremely fundamental to decree against. The third decree we said was Kiddush HaChodesh. Now, sanctifying the months, we know that every single Chag, every single festival in the Jewish calendar depends, at least in those days, depended on when the month was sanctified. And therefore, the Greeks felt that festivals are decided when they decide to make festivals and not by the moon or by any other power. And therefore, they decreed against this. Now, at this point, the Greeks realized that their plan is not working, since the Jews were not following their ways, And all their parties and judges were bringing in Jews, but only a very small amount of Jews. And therefore, at this point, Antiochus sent the great army in, and all the Yidden were either forced to convert or to die al Kiddush Hashem. And it's already brought down that tens of thousands of children, adults, and infants were killed al Kiddush Hashem in this battle. Also, it's brought down that the Greeks did the most terrible things. They bought blood. They bought up a pig on the Mizbeach and bought the blood and smeared it in the Beis Hamikdash. However, Hashem gave a special kayach, special strength to the Yidden, to the Hashmonaim, and they were victorious over the Greeks. Now, the lessons I think that one can take out of this, I think the most important lesson that stands out is emunah and bitachon. We see here that the Hashmonaim stood up. They were standing up not for their bodies, because this was not a war about the bodies. This was a war about the neshama, about the soul. And we see the Hashmonaim here stood up, and they said, this can't be. There's no way that the Greeks are going to conquer the soul of every Yid. And they stood up and they fought. Did they have any chance to win? Al pi derech hateva, according to nature, no way. It wasn't even a battle. But the Hashmonaim understood that this is the right thing to do, and we have to stand up for the right thing. And Bezrat Hashem, Hashem will help us. And this is an important rule in life, that whenever one has to face a point where they have to stand up for their faith, if they do it with the right intentions, they will 100% have Hatzlacha. Even if they're fighting the greatest army in the world, like we know the Hashmonaim were only a minority of a minority of a minority compared to the Greek army, and nevertheless, since they stood up and had bitachon and had emunah, they beat the Greeks in battle. And this is important in every generation. However, especially in this generation, where many people may have to stand up for their faith on a daily or weekly basis. And one has to keep in mind that one will never lose out. Sometimes one may think, oh, this time it will be okay, or this time it will be fine. But one has to remember that if one does stand up, one will definitely have Hatzlacha. And we see this from the Hashmonaim, since they stood up against the greatest army in the world, and nevertheless, they were Matzliach. Also, another message we see here is that these Yidden were willing to die al Kiddush Hashem. These Yidden, they were never faced to convert or to die, they died. And even though we are not faced with this every day, however, there is a concept of also living al Kiddush Hashem. As we know, the Beis Yosef used to learn with an angel, and at the end of his life, the Beis Yosef asked the angel, he said to the angel, "Angel, you promised me that I'm going to die al Kiddush Hashem." The Beis Yosef wanted to die al Kiddush Hashem. Why haven't I died? The Beis Yosef was already old. He said, why haven't I been Zaycha? Why haven't I merited to die al Kiddush Hashem? So the Malach said, you merited something even greater. You merited to live al Kiddush Hashem. And this is an extremely important lesson. One can live al Kiddush Hashem, which is even greater than die al Kiddush Hashem. And one can do this every single day. And we see this also from Chanukah. Just the practical application to this lesson that we see is, as I'm sure many of you have heard, there's a famous question. Why do we light menorah for 8 nights on Chanukah if only 7 nights were a miracle? So I'd like to share with you a beautiful answer that I heard. The answer is that the reason that we celebrate 8 nights is because the Yidden lit the menorah on the first night. The Yidden could have thought to themselves, listen, we're not sure if we're going to have oil, so we're not going to light tonight. We're rather going to wait for a few nights and then light when there's more oil. But they never. They lit on the first night. They had emunah and bitachon that the God, Hashem, who brings oil, who gave us oil for the first night, will also give us oil for the second night, and that itself was a nace. And that is why we light 8 nights of Chanukah, because the first night was a nace, and this was the nace of emunah and bitachon. And I think this is a very important lesson that each and every single one of us can take out of this Chag of Chanukah. Have a great day.